Now I've been going around checking, replacing all the, or resetting all the screws that I've taken out, or the bolts, so I know that I have all the bolts, and that also means these broken ones, so that I know which one I'm missing or which one I have to order new. So it's easy for me to check that out afterwards when I'm done. But I also wiped off the worst of the water and the cooling fluid and everything. So what I'm going to do now is remove like this exhaust gasket. Most of it came off in one piece, really easy, just came loose right away. But it's really important to get all of the old gasket material away from this surface. And it's also very important to get a smooth, nice surface to fit the exhaust elbow and the new gasket back on. Because if you don't, you are going to have an exhaust leak. That's 99.9% sure, I guess. But this is really stuck, really difficult to get off. So that's why I turn the camera back on, because this is probably something that's likely to happen. And I figured I could show you how I go about doing this. I don't have a lot of tools right here, so I have to make do with what I have, and this is a really old rusty knife I use for this kind of stuff, because I can hit it with a hammer without worrying about destroying it, because it's already destroyed. So I try to get it underneath as far as I can and wiggle it about a bit and see if I can get anything loose. And also there is always a bit of old gasket stuff here that doesn't want to come off close to the exhaust. It could be just rust as well, I don't know. So this is cast iron, so it's really, it can take a beating. If it was a soft material, it wouldn't be used for this kind of purpose. So, but you can see here is some stuff that doesn't want to come off, so I just have to be a bit hard on it. So it's really on there. So it is better to have a little void or a dent in the metal than to have something to go the other way in, because if you have something that's sticking out, it's gonna prevent the whole part from recessing. So if you have a little bit of indentation somehow in this surface, that doesn't really matter. It's not ideal, but of the two choices of leaving something or being so aggressive that you make a small indentation on this gasket surface, the indentation is the best part to handle. If it's so bad that you need to repair it, you can take it to a shop and they can weld on it, and you can machine the surface once again. So it's not the end of the world, but of course you don't want to destroy the part. So yeah, you have to try and make a qualified decision on how much beating I'm going to give this part. So oopsie. And it's also important, try not to cut yourself like this. It's not a good feeling, but that's the way it is sometimes. So ay. There's one layer of the there's one layer of gasket material left that I also need to get off, and I'm just wiggling and prying. I'm not praying. That's not what I do. I don't blame you if you do it, because if that works for you, that's great. So just bleeding all over the place. But that's a good thing, because when the blood goes through the cut, it kind of cleans it up a little bit as well. So for me, it's quite important to get all this gasket material off, because I have to perhaps lay a new nut on top of this stud that's left of the bolt, and then fill that void in the middle of the nut with weld. So I weld it onto this one. That makes this stud really hot, and that breaks the corrosion. Then it's likely to be just turned out with a 30mm spanner or something quite easily. So the best way for me to do it is if I get all the gasket material away, so that nut can sit as deep as possible. So of course it would be easier to remove this gasket material if this stud wasn't here, but I just have to work around it. There are scrapers that is meant to do this kind of work, but I don't have one. for the first, and for the second, when you get to this kind of work, you're just gonna ruin it anyway. So it's better to ruin a old crusty knife like this one. Ay, ay, ay. Over the working position a little bit. I don't know if you can really see it. It became really dark. And if I use this light, you get the flashing effect. That's not too bad. Now we're getting there. That is good. That's good. Now I've got rid of as good as all of the gasket material. There's a little bit left on the outside of this broken off bolt. Like so, we're getting there. So what's left here is just rust. So I'm just hitting it with the tip of the knife, what's left of the tip of the knife, to get it to break off the surface a bit. And I'll try to scrape it off so I don't risk to have something on the surface that is yeah, like bulging out a little bit. So get the last flakes of rust off. So it's just yeah, like that. You see the rust or the corrosion has really damaged the metal all the way in here, but the gasket, as you can see, is not covering this area, so it doesn't really matter, but I want to keep it as clean as possible. So yeah, next thing I need to remove is the exhaust manifold gasket. That is the same procedure as the other gaskets or gasket that I just removed. So just trying to get the knife underneath, hopefully all the way into the metal, and just wiggle it off. So like that, and as you can see, there's still one layer left. So, but this is a bit easier. You can just scrape it off like this. Because it's kind of a soft metal compound, almost like lead. I don't think it's lead. I don't think they're allowed to use that. So, just scraping until I hit the cast iron. The knife is not gonna stand any chance towards the cast iron. So if you are working on an aluminium part, you need to be really careful, because the knife is gonna cut the aluminium really easy, and then you have a problem. So now I'm just working my way around it. When I mount the gaskets again, I use some stuff like this, for instance, or something like it. to put on the gaskets, because then they don't stick like this. So if I have to take this one off again in sometime in the future, it's gonna be a really easy job to do this. This has just been mounted dry with no material to prevent it from sticking, and then you get this situation if you have to do something about it down the road. Like that, just like that. Coming along nicely now. It's just a little bit left. A few places. I guess the wire brush can handle the rest on this one. So now I just got 2 more to go, so I'm not gonna record that because you might be the most patient person in the world, but I don't think everyone is gonna appreciate 45 minutes of me scraping off old gaskets. I've shown you how I do it with very useful means. Well, I figured I could just show you this one as well. The other gaskets that I just removed was exhaust gaskets, and they contains a fair bit of metal because they are exposed to a lot of heat. But this is the gasket that sits underneath this filling cap. I took it off because I'm going to paint this, so I want the gasket gone. I want everything to be as clean as possible. Otherwise you don't have to take this thing off. But this is just a paper gasket. So the procedure is just the same. You get the knife underneath, you just work your way through or around it like this. And it's always really good to keep your other hands somewhere else so you don't cut yourself like I usually do. So then it's off. 95% of it. Still there is a little bit of residue from the old gasket sitting here, and all of this needs to be gone. It needs to be 100% clean, just metal when you're finished. Need to be perfect. So when you've done this, take an M3 cloth, perhaps some really fine sandpaper, get the surface looking really good. Wire brush could be the trick. It depends on how stuck everything is, but this gasket was really easy to take off. So I'm just using the knife, just scraping it along the surface at a like 30 degrees angle or something, and just sliding along, and being really careful. Again, if this was an aluminium part, you need to be really careful because you're gonna damage it so easy. So that's the nice thing about boats. You don't have aluminium parts too often. It's really often cast iron on the engine, sort of a inboard diesel at least. So this is not perfect, but it is well on the way. So still need to clean the surface a little bit. So I will just take some M3 cloth and like WD-40 or something, just put some on like that. I just rub the surface with this oil on it. To get all of the stuff out. But if you're using oil on something that's related to the cooling system, especially the freshwater cooling system, you need to make sure you don't get it into the cooling systems. You need to clean everything. Don't leave any oil residue that goes into the cooling system, because if you have a problem and you have a mechanic look at it and he will see this oil in the cooling fluid or in the coolant, he's gonna jump to a conclusion, an expensive one. He's gonna say, oh, you got oil in your cooling system. Most likely the cylinder head gasket. You need to replace that. That costs a lot of money. And of course he is a professional, you're gonna believe him. And when you come and ask him why there is oil in your cooling system, or he finds it by himself when he's looking at a different problem, he's gonna make that decision. And you can't blame him for that, because that's a logical problem, a logical solution. So make sure that everything is cleaned perfectly. Of course, if you do all the mechanical work yourself and you get some oil in your cooling fluid, you know where it comes from. You don't have to worry, but because it doesn't really damage anything, it's just not supposed to be there. But if you have a cylinder head gasket, there's going to be a lot of oil, not just the oil sheen on top of the fluid. So if you find oil in your cooling system, if there is a lot of oil, it could be the cylinder head gasket or something else. Depends on what your engine is built like. Does it have a water-cooled turbo? I could have a crack in it. Is it a heat exchanger on your oil filter? Could have a crack in it. So there's many options. So now I've scraped the surface with a knife, put some WD-40 on it, and rubbed it with this M3 cloth to get rid of whatever was left of this paper gasket. So I'd say this is within specs. Perhaps I will take and key the surface a little bit with sandpaper, maybe not. It looks really good, so we'll see. This is good enough, but when it's your own, you always have to want to do it a little bit better. But this is plenty good enough. If someone was paying you to do this and they just want to get the boat back in the water, this is good enough, because they don't want to look at you scrubbing on their engine, paid by the hour. They want to go out and use the boat. So you have to find a compromise. This will be good enough for this kind of gasket. These surfaces for the O-ring, I'm going to go over them with the sandpaper. I'm going to scrape off any gunk that sits around where the gasket has been, and clean them like I did here. So it's not much scraping needed, but just a little bit to get a clean surface. So I'm at the boat and trying to get some work done. What I'm doing right now is removing residue of gaskets also in the engine, because I removed the heat exchanger and the gasket came off with the heat exchanger, but there's also a layer of the gasket stuck to the engine or to the cylinder head. So I'm going to show you what that looks like and how I remove it. The closest one to the flywheel and the middle cylinder I've already cleaned off the residue, but on this one you can still see that there's a layer of the gasket left. I also put some paper towels curled up into the exhaust ports on the cylinder head, because I don't want debris from this gasket to enter into the cylinders. So if a valve is in an open position and I'm scraping this stuff off and it falls into the cylinder, it could all pass the valve and go all the way into the cylinder of the engine. I don't want that to happen. Didn't bring the knife with me, so I had to find a rusty old knife from the the galley on the boat. So I don't want to use what's been laying around in this boat for cooking, so I figured I could just as well use it to clean off this gasket and probably do other stuff with it later on. But it's not going to be for cooking. So just getting through this layer at one point. It's really stuck. It's almost impressive how well it sticks, this gasket. So it's quite a bit of work to get it off. Of course you can use like a fiber disc or something to just grind it off, and that's a quick and easy way to do it. You get a lot of dust, and that can be cleaned up. That's no problem, but I kind of like to do it this way. It takes a bit more time, but I keep the edges of the surface perfect. I don't round off any corners that's not supposed to be rounded off. It looks more like what it should look like, even though it doesn't really matter. It's just my preference. I like it this way. So a little bit of work, but that's that's fine by me. If I wanted a boat with no work on it, I would buy a new one. well, then I wouldn't buy a boat, because I can afford a new one. So I guess I don't have any option, but I'm fine with doing this work. So yeah, what can you say? Just gotta learn to love it, I guess. I've learned that a long time ago, so I'm fine with it. But this gasket material is, it's amazing. Hey, and this knife is not, it is a bit too soft for this job. It flexes too much, but right now this is what I've got. So I'm gonna turn the camera on to a time lapse now. So you see this surface here has no gasket residue on it, but this one here, you can see the gasket. The light is really annoying. I don't have a battery driven light, it's just an AC light on the boat, but I'm trying to alter the light a little bit. Maybe that helps, like so. So here you can see the surface has a texture to it, and that is the inside of the gasket. This one is different. So yeah, so I'm just gonna continue working like I've done in this area till it's like this all the way around, and then it's good to go. It's just gonna give it a quick sanding with the sandpaper. Now I've managed to get off all of this gasket material on the last exhaust port as well. So now this is all ready. I am going to take a sandpaper and just rub the surface a little bit